Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Hanna Season 2. In this video I will give my full review on the entirety of Season 2 of Hanna, the Amazon Prime show. So if you have not seen this show up to the very end of Season 2, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. But if you haven't watched this show, I'd highly recommend checking it out, as it is a really good show. So I never did a full-length review for Season 1. I almost did this as a Season 1 and Season 2, but I want to focus more on Season 2 since that's the season that just dropped. But the big question I had is, or the question I've heard asked is Season 2 as good as Season 1? And it's hard for me to answer. I think the two of them are pretty on par. I think they're different. So they're both good in different ways. But if I had to lean more towards one way or the other, I would lean towards liking Season 1 a bit better than Season 2. But of course it's not a huge difference, because I think Season 1 was a bit more spanning of a season, where you got more of a journey with Hanna, trying to hide from the Utrecht's people and the cat and mouse game and all the different people adventures she go on and the people she'd meet, where Season 2 was a lot more focused. It's mostly stick with one storyline and pretty much one location, and there are positives and negatives to that. I mean, the positives is you can get deeper into character development of the supporting characters, because in Season 1 we had a lot of supporting characters such as Eric's friends and Sophie, who Hanna met in England, and she was from England. Eventually she got there, and her friends, and those characters were never really that well developed because we didn't really spend that much time on any one place we were moving. So that could be seen as a positive for Season 2. But I prefer the structure of having the journey with adventures, where I think even though it did get more into character development in Season 2, I thought some of these character development we didn't ultimately need, and I felt like a lot of some of these episodes of storylines were treading water, and maybe some of these character motivations, to be sure, were a bit less believable than the character motivations in Season 1. Now, to me, a big sort of downside of Season 2 is that it doesn't have Joel Kinnaman playing Eric, because he, of course, died at the end of Season 1. I told you spoilers, so I don't want to hear about it. But I was actually surprised, because I typically don't like that actor, Joel Kinnaman, as he was in the remake of RoboCop. He played, was it Rick Flag in Suicide Squad, and also in Altered Carbon, which I didn't really care for that show, if I'm being completely honest. And I thought that actor was pretty flat in all three of those performances. I mean, he wasn't terrible, but he was just kind of generic in my opinion. Whereas in Season 1 of Hanna, he was amazing. I was like, holy shit, this guy is a good actor. He can act. He was really great. He turned in a really memorable performance as Eric in Season 1 of Hanna. So it is kind of a downside that we don't have him anymore. I mean, this is an actor, that was his best performance, and yet they killed him off so they could go do Altered Carbon, which, whatever. Some people like that show. I don't. But anyway, it is a downside that he wasn't there. But I also really, really like the actress who plays Hanna. I think I actually much prefer her to Saoirse Ronan, who played her in the film. Now, I think I might have even said this when I did a quick review about Season 1. I thought, because for the longest time I thought that this show was based off of a novel, and that the movie was based off of the same novel, but it turns out that's actually not the case. There is no novel. The film was original script, and this TV show is based off of the film. So it makes me want to kind of go back and watch the film. I don't know because I can't remember. I saw it once briefly. One of those like throwaway movies that's not terrible, but it's like instantly erased from my mind after 2 weeks because it's not very memorable. It's kind of just a generic action thriller. Where I think the show is like much better. It sticks in my mind. It's a hell of a lot more memorable, and it really struck me as a really good show. I particularly like the tone of the show. I think is very successful, having to do with some of the music that they use, which is actually really emotionally powerful. It gets you to relate to these characters in a way that the movie never did. And I just like, as I said, I like the actress. Not to say she's a better actress than Saoirse Ronan, but I just like the dynamic she brings to the character, how she comes across as a lot more innocent, which I think was definitely, and naive, which was definitely needed for season 1 when she was portrayed as someone who was completely ignorant of society because she was brought up in the woods in the middle of nowhere and she knew nothing what society was like. And it also makes the fact that she's this deadly assassin a lot more of a hidden weapon, because she does come off as someone who is just who strikes you as someone who would be fragile and just a normal teenage girl. And I like that. So I actually think it works better. And of course, the show being a show has a lot more time to go into character development. And I think it's really helped the story. So it went from a generic film that I kind of didn't really care about to a great TV show that I really like. Now, getting into season 2 and specifically more specific details in season 2, it begins with Hannah and Claire, because we met Claire in the finale of season 1 where she saved her from that Utrecht facility. And so I kind of had to, even like immediately after watching season 1, which I did watch a year ago when it first aired, I knew that season 2 would be continuing this storyline with Claire in the Utrecht program. And so it kind of made sense that we begin with Claire and Hannah living in the woods on their own and forming a bond. Now, at first I was a bit disappointed because the two of them were basically like just living in the forest and had no intentions to ever leave, and they just wanted to hide there. Like Claire kept saying she wanted to leave, but Hannah was like, no, we're safe here, we should never leave. Now, from an out-of-story perspective, you know that's not going to happen, because that would make it for a boring show. There needs to be action, suspense, intrigue, all that stuff, so they can't just hide in the forest for the entire second season. From an in-universe perspective, I was actually hoping that Hannah and Claire would team up to go after the Utrecht program and try to take it down. That's what I was expecting. So I was actually a bit disappointed that she just wanted to hide in the woods. But it does make a lot of sense for her character that her natural instinct or her first inclination would be to do that, because that's what her father did for her, and so that's basically all she knows. That's what she was taught was the best way to hide from Utrecht, was to go in the forest and just hide from them, because that's what her father did for her. And it also shows like she was basically acting the same way towards Claire that her father was acting towards her in season 1, and I like that dynamic, and I think it makes a lot of sense, because often people will take on the traits of their parents, and when they're put in a similar position, like to becoming parents, where she's basically being a guardian for Clara here, that you basically tend to treat your children the way your parents treated you when you were a child, even if that's not actually the best way to treat children. It's just an instinct that's learned. So that actually made a lot of sense, even though it's not what I really wanted for the story. But of course, As I said, it was obvious that they wouldn't just stay hidden in the forest, and Claire goes out looking for her mother, which leads... And it's also like Claire's encounter with the family, where she was like, oh, your people, what's going on, was also very similar to Hannah's first encounter with a teenage boy back in season 1. So it was kind of mirroring itself in a way, which I thought was actually really cool. I really like that aspect. And as I said, I think it makes a lot of sense for the characters. But the interesting thing about season 2 is Marissa, because in season 1 she was the bad guy. She was the big villain who was tracking Hannah and Eric down. But towards the end of season 1, as we saw, she got screwed over by Sawyer and the other people who were in charge of Utrecht, so she kind of switched sides. And that made her a much more interesting character this season, because she's ultimately was the ally for Hannah. She kind of took over Eric's role in many ways, but she brought a totally different dynamic to it. Now, first of all, Hannah knew, even though she had her spits with Eric and didn't always get along, she always knew that she could trust him, that he actually did have her best intentions at heart. And Eric was always a really interesting character because he was a soldier, a trained assassin, but he actually did love and care for Hannah and really wanted to take care of her. And basically he did raise her, even if he's not her father biologically. He did raise her as her father and basically became her father. So that's someone that Hannah knew that she could trust at all times. Whereas Marissa, there was not that inherent trust there, because Marissa was the one who was hunting her back in season 1, and for her to have a sudden heel turn, it still makes her a bit untrustworthy. And that Hannah does kind of trust Marissa, but not implicitly, and that's why I love the scene where Marissa generally wants to help Hannah and is trying to take her in the ferry, but because in her nature, it's her nature to hide things and be secretive. And Hannah finds out that Marissa's talking to someone named Carmichael who's involved in the Utrecht program, and so assumes the worst automatically. And I like that turn, like she beats the crap out of Marissa. But honestly, Marissa was just misleading Carmichael and wasn't really working with him, but she couldn't trust Hannah. And because of that made her come off as untrustworthy. And so I still prefer Eric. I still miss Eric a lot, but I do like the dynamic, the new dynamic this season with Marissa and Hannah, and how they can and cannot trust each other. So I really, really like those first few episodes. But then we get into more of the Utrecht's facility, the Meadows, and this is where I had more mixed feelings about the season, because it becomes a bit stagnant, as I say. And as I said, there are positives and negatives to this, because the positives is we do explore some of these other characters more, like Sandy and Jules in particular. I think Sandy's storyline was really well developed, and I think it's actually really impressive, because at the end of season 1 she was basically just this character in the next room who was like, oh, I refuse to leave, and didn't really do anything. But they made a whole character out of her, and how desperate she was for attention, desperate she was to believe this facility had her best interests at heart. And I like the character of the CIA analyst whom they brought on board. Like, they had this one scene with her coming on board. You assumed that she would be like an important character, and she was, but she turned out a bit different than what I thought. But she was actually... It's hard to say, because she was great at manipulating the young girls, knew exactly what to do to sort of turn them onto their side, which for most of them was fairly easy, particularly with Sandy. Like, it worked really, really well. But when Clara came on, it was a lot harder to accomplish that, but she eventually accomplished that. And then also eventually accomplished that with Hanna, too, when Hanna was eventually brought in. And I think I like how she was like, with all the other girls, we can just have a a gap. They have a missing gap with their parents because they never had parents, so we just fill that in. That's easy. But with Hanna, she was raised by a father, and I love how Carmichael was resistant to that. It's like, oh, Eric Keller wasn't her father, and she's like, no, essentially he was. And so if we try to replace him, then we're just going to fail horribly. We had to acknowledge him, but give her something after him, something she can move on past him for, but we can't just dismiss him. And she does, and it works. Now, I must admit that I didn't really buy Claire and Hannah's turn to totally being devoted to Utrecht. I mean, Claire, I kind of buy. Okay, sure, it does kind of make sense. They were lying to her and saying her mother was dead. Okay, so I do kind of buy her turn. I was a bit iffy on it. Hannah's, I don't buy. Even like and she eventually does become completely devoted to them, which it seemed to happen too fast because she was very resistant at first, which made sense. And in fact, she says later in the season when she turns against Utrecht again that everything her father taught was to fight Utrecht, and that's her whole life she's been taught to fight that, which is why I don't buy she ever turned to them in the first place. I mean, I know that CIA analyst was very effective, but I don't think anyone could be that effective. I mean, that's what was like drilled into her head from an early age. So yeah, I don't know. I just that was too much for me. But and here's also the other thing is like the character of Jules. Like it seemed like there was a lot of potential that they didn't really fully realize with her, and ultimately she felt unnecessary and just a kind of, this is what I'm saying about the show kind of spinning its wheels, because they introduce her and they still introduce the fact that she's a lesbian, and because they give her the identity to have a boyfriend, she eventually mentions that, oh, I broke up with him, and it seemed to imply that the people who were running the place, like Leo, would find this information and use it and say like, okay, let's make her a lesbian then, because we can use an operative who is a lesbian, which they actually do later in the show, but they don't actually state that that's what they do. Like, they never said, oh, look, they gave me a new identity, I have this girlfriend, and they're acknowledging that I'm openly gay, and they're fine with that, and they embrace it, which is what they should do. And it seems like that's what they do when they actually send her in the mission, but they don't actually address that earlier on, which I wish it did. And also, like, once she's on the mission, like, she kills that one dude who's helping Hanna, and then like tries to lure Hanna into the trap, and then we never see her again. So I don't know, it didn't seem like this character was really necessary, and we didn't really need to spend so much time developing her. But then again, she may become more important in season 3. I'm sure she may appear yet again in season 3, but whatever. I still think they could have done more. Now, I did like the whole scene about them like stealing liquor to go in the party, but Leo actually was doing that as a training exercise, because for one thing, he wanted them to be more like teenage girls, to blend in more, and being disobedient is part of being a teenager, but also it was practicing their skills at manipulating the face and, what was it, the face and trigger thing. And I like the reveals when he just casually mentioned, oh, great job getting the alcohol, and they were kind of pissed off because they thought they were like breaking the rules, but they were actually manipulated into doing it. So when they actually sent Hanna and Jules on the mission, to me it was the most obvious thing in the world that Hanna would turn. And here's the thing, like, I know that Carmichael was like really liked Hanna because she was like the best trained out of it. Her skills were clearly better, above and beyond the other girls, which mostly had to do with her experiences in the world that the other girls were lacking. So I knew he was most impressed with her, but I still think it was completely idiotic. And they mentioned in the show that she had only been there for 2 months. It was really idiotic to send her out on the mission that soon. because he should have realized. I mean, it was the most obvious thing in the world that she would turn on them. I mean, I honestly didn't buy that she was ever devoted to them in the first place. So, for him to think, oh yeah, for him to think that she would stay devoted to them once she gets thrown out in the real world was really idiotic to him, for him to do, to the point where I don't really buy it, honestly. And by the way, I really like the dynamic this season. Is kind of a changeover from season 1, because as I said in season 1, Hanna was the naive one who didn't know anything about the world or society and was really naive in the ways of being what a teenage girl is like. And this season, she's put into the Utrecht facility, where she's all of a sudden the knowledgeable one. She's the one with the world experience, where all the other girls had never left that facility before, and they have no idea what it's like. They've just been told what it's like to be in the real world. And it's interesting that one party scene where they asked Hanna if she kissed the boy, and she said yes. And then they asked if she had sex, and she said no, but we know that she did. I was kind of curious of why she lied. I think maybe she was ashamed because the boy she had sex with was the crush of her best friend, and it cost her her friendship. Probably had something to do with it, so it's not something she remembers very fondly. And it's actually a moment where she let her urges get the better of her. So yeah, so I thought, but it's interesting that she's the one who's not a virgin, had all these experiences this season. So she's the experienced one compared to the last season where she was the naive one, where all these other girls are naive. I like that heel turn. But anyway, yeah, I did find the mission that they went on really interesting, and I like how they got into the mindset of that reporter and how Hanna was able to sympathize with her, and how Jules is basically just drinking the Kool-Aid so much because she is the trained assassin that she was able just pretending to like her and identify with her, but really she had no qualms of sending her to her death. And yeah. And so it does show how fucked up Jules is and how effective the program was. But I do buy that Hanna was totally turned, and that she joined these other people to try to stop them. And I did like the final showdown in Barcelona. Again, Clara was showing more hesitation. She wasn't as quick to turn as Hanna, which again makes sense, but she wasn't as brainwashed as Sandy and Jules were, which also makes sense. Sandy was completely brainwashed, and she was all on board with sending a young woman that she befriended to her death and killing her father. She killed her father, by the way, and had no issue with doing that. And it's kind of a moment where Carmichael says, "I'm proud of you," to her, and like pats her shoulder. And you can see how happy, how this is like the proudest day of her life when Carmichael said, "I'm proud of you." Yeah, that is fucked up. It's more fucked up to what these people like Carmichael are doing. That they're really manipulated these girls to the nth degree. That she sees them as her father figure, basically. It's a really fucked up thing. So I think it's good storytelling. But then the way they played Claire's hesitation and how Hanna was slowly chipping away at her, and eventually Claire turned to help Hanna, and they tried to save Kat from being assassinated. Like, that was all intense. Absolutely loved it. I think I don't have mixed feelings about the whole Marissa thing, being rescued from prison, but the whole rescue being staged in order to find Hanna. Actually, no, I don't know. It makes sense. It's actually it was probably one of the smartest things Carmichael ever did, because he realized that Marissa would never break, and so she's essentially useless to him. So the best use he could make of her was to have her lead them to Hanna. And if it wasn't for the fact that Hanna saw that dude's phone, the plan would have worked, actually. So actually, that was actually a brilliant plan. But yeah, so the ending standoff was great, with Leo hunting down Clara and then eventually getting the better of Leo, and how Marissa sort of manipulates the whole situation, she gets the sort of the secret information on Carmichael that he was a leak. That was the whole reason why there was that government guy. I can't remember what his position was, senator or whatever the fuck he was. That's how he knew about the program, was because of it was Carmichael's fault, and she uses that information against him, and is setting the stage for Hanna to go back into the program, and then for Carmichael to now be on their side because she has leverage over him, and to take down Utrecht from the inside, which is kind of what I thought they would do this season, but whatever. it's going to be next season. But Claire's not going to be involved because she decided to part ways so she could go be with her mother, which was a very touching storyline. Now, I watched a review where someone said they didn't buy the relationship between Hanna and Claire, and I completely disagree. I totally bought it. Hanna had this motherly sort of instinct, and I think they sold that very well from the first episode, showing them living together, and that they had this strong family bond-esque connection. And so I found it really touching at the end, where Hanna was willing to let Clara go because she saw how important this was to Clara. Even though Clara was very important to Hanna, she was basically a replacement for her father, who died, and she sort of latched onto her for that. But she was strong enough to let her go and to give her the passport. Like, almost tearing up now. That was a very touching moment, and I thought it was extremely effective seeing Clara reunited with her actual mother at the end of the show. But, of course, just setting us up for season 3, which I really, really hope does happen, where, Hanna and Marissa are going to now have Carmichael under their thumb, and they're going to try to take down Utrecht. Now, I'm still a bit unclear of how sanctioned Utrecht actually is, but I don't know. Maybe they'll, is it sanctioned by the U.S. government? Is it just a rogue element? I don't know. They recruited the CIA analyst, so they must have some official red stamp. I don't know. Hopefully they'll get more into this in season 3. But I do have, speaking of the CIA analyst, Terry Miller, I believe her name was, I had to mention the scene with her where she finds the letter or the email from Clara's mother, and Clara and her mother, and she knew exactly where they were going to be so she could hunt them. And it was her job to find Clara so she could just tell her superiors and they would kill Clara, probably her mother too. And instead, she erased the email. And I thought that was a great moment. I completely buy that she did that because part of her job was to try to get in touch with this girl's feelings, and for the most part she used that to manipulate them in very sort of non-moral ways. She wasn't a really good person, had no moral compunctions about a lot of things, but I bought that she got to know Clara so well, and her desire to have a mother, and that she just couldn't bring herself to take that away from her. That was a strong moment too that I completely bought. So I thought this was a really good season. So my rating for Hanna season 2 out of 10 is an 8. Extremely good. I thought this, which I think I gave season 1 an 8 as well. I thought it was a great season, a lot of strong points, a lot of emotional points, but to me, again, it doesn't quite reach the moment of being like a 9 or a 10 or something that's completely great. I think it's one close there, but it's lacking a little something. And as I said, I think season 2 was a bit too focused on the Meadows, and some of the character development seemed to be pointless, and it was a bit too focused on this one situation where I would have rather seen a more broader, more adventure-based story like they had in season 1. But then again, other aspects of it, like the great character relationships between Clara and Hanna and stuff like that, and Hanna and Marissa and stuff like that, I thought were done extremely well. Plus, another thing I gotta mention I thought they did really well was the callbacks to when Hanna had flashbacks of things that would remind her of like her troubled birth, or like Eric's death, like the few moments in the finale, for example, where they dealt with Kat having to deal with her father dying, and how Hanna could relate to that, and how she actually saw the moment that her father died and how that affected her. Really powerful stuff, done really well. So another really great season. So that is it for my review of Hanna Season 2. If you enjoyed that, please be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to my channel as I continue to cover many other shows such as Star Trek, The Expanse, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.